least you can start your self-organization by improving those things around you that are self-evidently not good. And that's easy, man. Anybody can do this. You can sit down for 10 minutes, say, well, I'm going to be honest with myself. Like, oh, that's a horrible thing to do. I'm going to be honest with myself. Okay, I'm probably doing a dozen stupid things that I could quit doing that are making my life more wretched, and also the people around me. And so you think, okay,
Stressing, drinking.
what are those things? And if you really want to know, you have to want to know. And you're going to get a bunch of information that you don't want to hear, but you'll know it's true, and you already knew it in some sense. And then you can ask yourself, okay, that sucks and it's miserable and it's not very self-affirming. Is there one of those things I would be willing to do something about, that I would actually do something about, that I could do something?
Stop drinking. Drink soda water. Stress. I've learned my breathing helps with that a lot. Stops me going in my emotions, and it's all good. Keep well rested.
Something about that I would do something about, which is also another horrible question, because as soon as you get an answer to that, then you have a responsibility, right? It's like, oh God, I have to go do that. And it's something you don't want to do. You don't
Gotta tackle it head on, though.
want to do it. That's why you've been avoiding it. And so then it's right in front of you. And it's like it's some little trivial, horrible thing that you're not going to get a pat on the back for, and no one's going to give you an award for it. And most people would just say, Jesus, you should have done that a long time ago, you moron.
But you feel relief and benefit and peace after you've solved these things. That's good.
But then you go do it. That's kind of humility, I would say. And then you keep doing that.
Had people who weren't able to talk to each other, and we had these Iraqis that we didn't speak English, and we had these units that we hadn't worked with before, and they did things that we didn't expect, and there's plenty of blame to go around. And essentially I said, hey, you know whose fault this is? This is my fault. I'm the commander. And so when I hear you say things like that, it strikes me that you uncovered this through your study of history and philosophy and religion. And I learned it, as, like I said, a certified knuckle dragger out on the battlefield that realized, if you're going to exist as a leader and as a human, then you need to take responsibility for what happens around you. And that's, again...
Yeah, and you have to take, and the religious notion in some sense is that you have to take ultimate responsibility, in that, in some sense, the things that happen around you. I mean, this is... Dostoevsky, I think, said something like, every man is responsible for everything that happens to him and everything that happens to everyone else. And that's, it's a crazy statement, right? It's a crazy statement. And he was a pretty extreme person in many, many ways. But there's a level at which that's metaphysically true, because what happens is that it's failure to act often that's the most catastrophic. It's to not do the right thing when the situation presents itself, and it's very specific. You're constantly in situations where you could do the right thing if you were willing to take a risk that's actually of relatively moderate size, and you know that you could take the risk, and you know that you should take the risk, and you don't. And that happens to people all making sacrifices and they don't work. There's a binary choice, and one is, there's something wrong with the structure of reality, and the other is there's something wrong with your approach. And so then you might say, let's take the first idea, there's something wrong with the structure of reality. It's like, you're really going to say that, are you? You're really going to come out and say, I know enough to judge the nature of being. And then the alternative is also quite frightening, because then, it's you that's making the mistakes, and you might be wrong at a really deep level, and that might mean that a lot of you has to burn off and be transformed. Maybe even things about yourself that you think are admirable and that you like, because your position, your self-conceptualization is so warped and wrong. And that's really daunting. But, when people set themselves up as the judge of being, I've written about this a fair bit in my new book, which is called 12 Rules for Life. When people set themselves up as the judge of being, then they take on what can only be described as a kind of satanic arrogance, because they've actually taken to themselves the moral right to criticize the structure of existence itself. It's like, you better be careful when you do something like that, because you're setting yourself up as the judge of being. And the Columbine.
Everyone's different folk, different strokes. Everyone's got their own way of going about things, and you can't like judge different people's ways. Different people's ways can lead to the same place, and that's what I believe.
What kind of moron am I? And what stupid things am I doing? And then what could I possibly do to get rid of one of those a little bit now? Well, anybody can do that. And that's associated with these great evils, you know, in this way that we've already described. It's like you're constraining, you're improving your character, and you're constraining the kinds of actions and perceptions that you have that are going to make you sick of life and work against it. Because failure does that. That's the Cain story. It's like, keep screwing up, man. See what happens. If you think that isn't going to make you
Destroy these things.
bitter, and if that isn't going to make you vengeful, and if that isn't going to make you work to
destroy all the negative emotions, and keep clearing your heart of all these impurities.
hurt people around you, or at least not to help them, which is the same thing, then you're just not paying attention. Everyone knows that's true. So, well,
I may make a little mistake, but I always look back on them, and I study every little part of them.
well, that's responsibility, right? And then, so you take on this great task of putting yourself together, it gives you life meaning. And that also helps you be buttressed against the fact that there's lots of suffering in life and there's lots of malevolence.
Building yourself up instead of destroying yourself. Learn to enjoy building yourself up.
It's like, yeah, true, man. Absolutely. It's worse than you think, even. But you can do more about it than you think. And there's nothing in it except good, but you also have to take responsibility.
Getting addicted to helping yourself.
So that's the thing. You got to decide if that's what you're going to do. But you don't get to whine about it if you don't, because you haven't tested it.
So people don't even have to look for some grand goal in the sky, some elevated goal of what they're going to do, whether it's a financial goal, whether it's a non-profit goal, and they could look around their bedroom and figure out what they're going to do right now to improve things.
One of the things I learned from reading Solzhenitsyn is he talked about his moral transformation in the camps. And he said the first thing that transformed him to some degree was looking at people in the camps who did refuse to do immoral things no matter what. He said he ran into people like that, and that just blew him away, because you already laid that out. It's like, he said they were continually choosing between their life and their conscience, and they chose their conscience. Like, and he tells some amazing stories in the Gulag Archipelago about, you know, dozens of people he met like that, and they're stories that of heroism, moral heroism under absolutely vicious conditions. You just can't believe them, you know. So that's pretty amazing. But he said that once he kind of figured out that there was a difference between attending to your conscience and doing whatever was necessary to prolong your miserable existence, that he started to think about that deeply, and that he went over his life with a fine-tooth comb and tried to figure out everything he did that he knew was wrong.
Yeah, I've gone over my life with a comb, just figuring out everything that's wrong. It's good thing to do. I still got a lot of work, but I make sure I go back through it, figuring out as much as I can.
And then to try to figure out what he could do in the present to rectify that. You know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to atone. That's the right way of thinking about it. You know,
I need to keep my heart pure, breathe, don't tense up. You know, don't let any bad emotions affect yeah. Let it all roll off my back. Yeah.
You do something wrong, and well, maybe you can't even fix it with the person you did the wrong to, but maybe there's something else you could do that would be good enough so that, you can think, okay, well,
Mm,
at least those balance out and maybe I'm a little bit on the side of the positive.
yeah.
So he did.
Well, I can't help the mistakes I've done with people in the past that they've made their minds up. So now all I can do is concentrate on making myself better for the next, like, the next task or like problems run into. I can combat them better and work around them better.
That, and that he said that straightened him out a lot. And then he wrote this book, this amazing book that, cut the communist intellectuals off at their knees and changed the world, really. And that's a hell of a thing for someone to do who's a, miserable Zek in a concentration camp. That's a hell of a story, man. And it's not the only one like it. So you don't know how much power you have where you stand, even if you look weak and if what's around you is terrible, well, then you've got lots of things to do, that's for sure. And they're announcing themselves right there. Plan. And, you got to kind of hold the plan loosely, so because you're going to make mistakes formulating it. But the way it works basically is you aim at something in the future. And so then you start moving forward. And as you move forward, you accrue more experience and more information. Sometimes that's through failure. It doesn't matter, but you're not staying in the same place. So you're actually growing, even if you're doing badly, if you learn from those mistakes. And so then you move towards the goal and your perspective shifts. And then you might have to modify the goal a bit
Always make sure you learn from those mistakes.
because now you're a little smarter. You think, well, that other goal wasn't helpful. It's like, yes, it was, because it moved you an inch farther ahead. And so,
Sometimes I don't learn. I have to do the mistakes a couple times, maybe 3.
you kind of approach the final goal in a zigzag manner, and the zigs
Yeah,
and the zags get less extreme as you get closer to the final goal. But you have to do a lot of zigzagging to begin with, so you got to give yourself that space for error. That's why there's an archetypal life.
yeah, I don't give myself space for error. Sometimes I get very stressed. I'm working on that, and I think I'll have it sorted.
Idea that the fool is the precursor to the savior, which is a really, and you see that with comedians. Comedians are fools and they tell the truth, right? So in the court, jester is the only person who gets to tell the truth, and a fool will take a risk as well, and you need to take risks in order to progress. So that's the idea. But it also means that you have to allow yourself to make the mistakes that are necessary
Yeah, I have to allow myself to make mistakes that are necessary. So I've got to be a bit of a fool. I've got to be a bit of a
while you
fool.
progress and not beat yourself to death about it. And
Yeah,
so that's also really helpful because it means that when you're formulating your plans, you can say, well, this is the best I can do now, subject to revision. It's like, great, that's good enough. Really, it's good enough. It just has to move you to the next place.
That's interesting because obviously I've done a ton of military planning, and I would see guys that would get so wrapped around trying to make the perfect plan, and it would take them so long to plan that by the time they're ready to execute the plan, the whole target had shifted and things had moved and the battlefield had changed. They're not ready to do this anymore. So you need to come up with like you said, you need to come up with a good idea of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then you start to move. And as you move, you start to see things from a different angle, and you gain more intelligence, and you get another report, and all of a sudden the target shifts a little bit, but you're adapting and you're closer to the target anyways.
keep moving. Yeah,
Very, very
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it is. It's also the idea that you're gaining information. Because you might say, well, I don't know what to do with my life, so maybe I should just stay here and figure it out. It's like, no. If you stay there, then all you know is what you know while you're there. And you don't know enough because you can't make a plan. So make a bad plan. Even if it's actually a plan that works out so that it's opposite of what you want. If you move towards that plan, you're going to know more clearly that it's opposite of what you want. And as soon as you know that it's opposite, you know, I should be going in the other direction. So like that's not a retreat. That's an advance. And the thing is, we're active creatures and we're always navigating through territory.
areas, but it just popped up, and while I was sleeping, I had my headphones on, and then I woke up after a really good dream woke up and realized I had my headphones on listening to this, so give it a go.